Hello, welcome to Nature Connects, TNC in Massachusetts webinar series that connects you with scientists, experts, influencers, and our partners from New England and around the world. Thanks for joining us today. I'm your host, Allison Bowden, TNC in Massachusetts Director of Conservation Science and Strategy. We have an exciting program for you today. We'll be discussing the risks of climate change and biodiversity loss, and benefits of nature-based systems for increasing resilience to extreme events and for carbon sequestration, and the potential of innovative insurance products and more sustainable investment strategies as solutions. Before we dive into today's program, I wanted to share a little bit about our guests. We'll be talking with Charlie Sadati from Insure. Charlie has over 35 years experience in corporate leadership, serial entrepreneurship, and not-for-profit board and C-level staff roles. He is focused on the intersection of insurance, technology, and how public and private stakeholders can collectively catalyze a bold insurance industry response to climate risk. He aims to create better insurance products that will reduce the insurance protection gap, accelerate the transition to a low-carbon economy, incentivize investments in community resilience, and promote nature-positive practices. Also joining us is Makalea Ane. She leads community engagement and partnerships for TNC in Hawaii and Palmyra. She's worked with indigenous communities and government agencies on ocean and coastal conservation issues for the public, private, and nonprofit sectors across Hawaii for more than 2 decades. Eric Roberts had planned to present along with Makalea today, but he's on family leave. He and his wife welcomed a healthy baby to their family earlier this week, several weeks earlier than expected. So we extend our congratulations to Eric, and we'll hear from him on a webinar in the future. So as you think of questions for Charlie and Makalea, please enter them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Thanks so much for joining us today. And I'll pass it on to get you started. So I believe Charlie is first. Unmute, Charlie.
Can you hear me now? I'm sorry.
I can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. You know, first time on Zoom. So first of all, thank you so much. We are so excited to participate with TNC. As Allison said, Insure is a nonprofit. Our mission is to make better products, insurance products and services that support a bold insurance industry response to climate change. Just a question about what is showing. Is the slide showing? I'm gonna stop the sharing. Hold on.
It says end of slideshow.
Okay. Apologize. There we go. Okay. So my job today, super excited to be here. Just we know we have on the call people from across a range of expertise around insurance and nature-based solutions, nature issues. So what I'm going to do is really kind of set the insurance landscape related to nature-based opportunities where insurance can impact the world in a positive way, starting with some very basic kind of understanding of how insurance works. Starting with the purpose of insurance. Insurance is designed to reduce uncertainty by transferring risk and manage the potential bad things that can happen, manage accidental losses. And we'll get to how that relates to insuring natural assets and promoting a nature positive environment. One of the first things to really understand about insurance is it's a contractual agreement. Usually it's between two parties, sometimes three parties, but it is an agreement. So the contract matters, and the contracts can be designed to essentially it's a promise to pay that when something bad happens, and it is designed to pay either the first party, which is a party to the agreement. So typically a two-party agreement is there's the insurer and then there's the policy holder. And if something bad happens, money could go to the policy holder, that's the first party, or sometimes it could go to a third party. Like, for example, if you have a car accident and you hit somebody and injure somebody else. So it's really important to understand how insurance works. You really need to understand what's in the agreement, because the devil is often in the details. And some of the things that matter are what triggers the payment in the policy. Typically, it's some sort of unfortunate event. Often it could be the payment is triggered by actual damage. We're going to talk about different types of policies that are parametric insurance, that the damage is that there's a metric instead of the actual damage that is caused. Important to understand that all insurance, there's the contract part, the policy, the forms. Insurance is very regulated, so often it has to be approved by some sort of regulator. There's the underwriting, the insurance industry to create a product that allows somebody to transfer a risk and pay a small amount of money so that when the big event happens, the payment can actually occur. The insurance company needs to understand the scope and the probability and the likelihood of the larger event so that they can figure out what the price of that insurance is and how they could write the contract in a way that works for everybody. There has to be the power of insurance is that there's typically a large company with a large pool of capital, that those resources are large enough so that when like large scale catastrophes happen, there's enough money to actually pay not just the individual policy, but maybe a lot of claims happen at the same time. So there needs to be an insurance provider in the background that has a large amount of assets that can pay the claims. And there needs to be, obviously, there needs to be a way to distribute. Even though they're contracts, they are products and services are often embedded into insurance. So there needs to be the ability to transact the business, which can often be complicated based on just what I was talking about here. But that kind of brings me to the very, a unique type of insurance, which is parametric insurance. So instead of the insurance being based on the actual damage that occurs, parametric insurance is triggered by a metric, some sort of event that happens that is often related to the damage, but not actually a measurement of the damage. So, for example, life insurance is a kind of parametric insurance. Nobody says the trigger for a payment is typically a death certificate, but the payment isn't. Nobody comes out and says, thank God, nobody comes out and says, how valuable is Charlie's life versus somebody else's life. There is a fixed number for the life insurance policy that was purchased. And when the death happens in life insurance, it triggers the payment. So that's how parametric insurance works. And innovation in insurance is now looking at how can you do parametric insurance for a lot of different things. beyond like life insurance. So, and I think we're going to be talking about that when we get into the TNC project, which is super exciting. So that's kind of a baseline of how insurance works. And we are super excited to have that impact pillar in our mission that says we want insurance to promote a nature positive practices, because as we look at the world, we see there's a lot of human activities that are impacting biodiversity. And there's this crazy fact that I learned over the last few years that economic activity, $44 trillion worth of economic activity, ultimately is highly dependent on or somewhat dependent on nature-based assets. And it's like 50% of all economic activity. If you peel back that onion, it goes back to some sort of natural asset. And so those two facts, that human activities are impacting biodiversity and loss of biodiversity can impact human activity and economic activity. If you really kind of look at that and say, well, there's a lot of bad things that can happen and are happening. If you get back to the purpose of insurance is to reduce uncertainty around that, help create financial situations that can help manage the accidental loss. I think we're super excited to hear the story about kind of what TNC's been doing, but we are also super excited about thinking about new ways to identify situations where we know that bad things have happened and bad things could happen, and create really novel insurance products and services that can provide a better landscape going forward that protects the natural assets of the world. And we'll probably get into some kind of questions and hypotheticals, but I think hopefully that set a kind of a landscape of kind of how insurance works at the basic level and set up the discussion about the TNC project that is super exciting.
Aloha, good morning. Bao Oshana Makale Ane o Community-Based Program Manager, Mother Nature Conservancy. It is 6:00 a.m. in the morning and I'm getting my kids ready for school. So I'm sorry if they are in the background. I love you very much. That was Charlie, you set that up wonderfully, and hopefully that helps you get a really good understanding of parametric insurance and the possibilities, kind of just wrap your head around what is this insurance that we're talking about, and then I can really dive into how we have implemented it in Hawaii. So I'm thinking are you seeing my slide or the presenter slide? I think you can see my regular slide. Can't see anybody's faces.
We can see your speaker, your presenter view.
Okay. So it hid something I needed, but no problem. So I wanted to just dive into our parametric insurance that we established here in Hawaii. And so first off we developed a guide about 3 or 4 years ago. It's been a while since we've really looked at getting insurance implemented here. And
Makalea, just 1 second. Could you go into PowerPoint full screen view? Because we're seeing your the presenter view.
Let's see. Oh. Okay. That better?
Now it's right. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. That's what I want. Okay. So we have 6 steps for ensuring your natural assets. So if you want to go through all these steps in your deck of the woods, we have a guide for you. So I'm going to go through these 6 steps with you today, and then we can take questions at the end. Hopefully, I have a video coming up next. And so before we really get into the money and financial and mechanisms and how we actually implemented the policy, I wanted to share a little bit about why coral reefs were in Hawaii. We insured coral reefs, by the way. Why we insured this natural asset, not from a monetary standpoint, but from a cultural standpoint. And so we have our Kumulipo, it's called, it's our genealogy chant for all of creation. So it really it actually mimics the Darwin's theory of evolution. And I'm just gonna play the first stanza. My kids are learning this in school. Most of our kids in Hawaii learned this creation chant, and it talks about life coming from the depths of the ocean, the pole, and coming up and creating life. And the first organism that we name in our Kumulipo, it's called to hanao, or to be born, is the coral polyp. And then eventually humans are born. And so this really is embedded in our culture and our life and our na'au, our internal being, that we are connected to the oceans, we're connected to the coral reef, and we're connected to po, which is, it's analogous to the deep sea. And so a lot of things that are happening now in the world are very pertinent to what's happening, connects us to our culture. So I'm going to play a recording that my son made last night, because he knew that I was going to be doing this presentation, and he said, oh, I want to sing for you. So he's going to oli, or chant, and I'll chant with him. And hopefully the recording comes out okay. Bella kahunua,
Kahuli lole kalani, ipuka iyaka kala, oma lama lama kamala, makali kapo, vale vale kumunu ai, kumu okali po ili po ai, kumu okapo ipo ai. Okalipo lipo kala, okalipo kapo. O valeho ika no kapo. Anau kumulipo ikapo he kane. Anau ko ele ikapo he wahine. Ano kukawa, ano kanea kuka. Ano ke koe nuhe eli o puhonua. Ano ke koe puka.
So hopefully you're able to hear that okay. And so the part at the end that he was chanting by himself, it says hanau ka uka o ko'ako'a, which is the ko'ako'a is our coral polyp. And so he's saying, come forth and bring forth the coral polyp. And then it names the male and female versions. And so just wanted to share a little bit about if you're assessing your natural assets, assessing all of it, equity and culture and monetary value. And so the first step for assessing natural in our book, our guidebook, is assessing our natural assets. So what does coral reefs provide to our economy? And so we worked with USGS to evaluate coral reefs, as well as looked at a case study for actually looking at monetary values. What does it provide for flood protection near shore reefs, as well as reef adjacent tourism and other attributes. So those are the numbers: $836 million of flood protection, $13 million of near shore reef, and $1.2 billion
Hi, folks. We seem to have lost Makalea for a second. Hopefully she'll be able to jump back in. If we'll give her a minute to rejoin. She's joining us all the way from Hawaii at 6 a.m. I hope she's able to get back in.
Allison, while we're waiting, happy to take questions or, I know I was dying to get into it. We were just getting into it. It was super exciting. If there's anything, we can kind of throw at me, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, I would, excuse me, I think that's a good idea, since we don't know if the internet gods are going to cooperate with us. So Charlie, how about if you talk about, I think what Makalea was just starting to set up. How could insurance and nature be combined for reducing risk and helping ecosystems adapt to climate change impacts? How does that work?
That's a great question. And I think we're just absolutely scratching the surface, but you know, it seems obvious they are nature-based assets. For the most part, though, they are not treated like assets. Most nature, I'll finish the answer and then she can jump back in. But you know, most individual and corporate assets are insured, and because they're assets, they're valuable. They're things that are worthy of kind of protecting. And nature-based assets often historically have not been. So just recognizing them as the important assets that they are and saying, let's insure them is kind of a step in the right direction. And I'll kick it back to you. We were just saying how bummed out we were. We lost you because we were just getting into the super exciting part. So all yours.
Thank you, Charlie. And welcome back, Makalea.
Thank you very much. We had a glitch in our internet. Thank you very much for jumping in, Charlie. So let's get back into our presentation. I think I left off with just looking at your natural assets and if, you know, what do you want to insure? My dog's tail is wagging back there. It's a lot of noise. Oops. Switch. Okay. So I hope you got to hear my son's Oli.
Yes, thank you.
And so, you know, what kind of natural assets do you have? We are focusing here on corals. We do not have mangroves. Well, we actually have mangroves, but they're invasive and they're not adapted to this place. So we don't insure mangroves here, but many places in the world do, and they're a very important natural asset. Let's see. So the second step to insuring or getting parametric insurance is looking at who are the stakeholders, who can actually purchase insurance and who has an insurable interest. And so we were able to jumpstart parametric insurance here because we do invest in coral reef protection. So we could prove that we have an investment in this natural asset. Other places that in Mexico, for example, that has parametric insurance for coral reefs, they have the government actually purchases the insurance policy, but you know, even hotels that are being protected by coral reefs and protect their shorelines, and other parties and estates that benefit from this protection. Stop it. So we are working with the state to actually, you know, we got this implemented, but the state is working on their end to figure out how they can purchase it themselves. And so they had a concurrent resolution in the state ledge last year. And then this year they had proposed to pay for the insurance. And so as we all know, legislation takes forever. So we will continue to work with them to evaluate if they're a potential policyholder. And so number 3 is to design the insurance. So there are many different ways, as Charlie had mentioned, you know, we have to parametric insurance, you have to develop the payouts and triggers and assess your actual loss up front. And so how do you do that? There's different parameters that you can look at. There's the parameter in Mexico, for example, is wind speed. Their threshold is a Category 1 hurricane, and then they developed a payout matrix. And so when you're designing your insurance, you want to look at all of these things. And sorry, there was one more slide that I wanted to get to, but maybe it's not in here. And then so after you look at, you know, what are the different triggers that you can evaluate? What information do we have? We need open source data and information to be able to prove that that event happened and that this specific impacts to your coral reefs has is a correlation. So the next step is to actually define your institutional arrangement. Who's going to take out the insurance policy, but then also how are you going to disseminate the money? You have all this money, and as a nonprofit organization, we want to be very transparent about how this money is being used and making sure that we respond in an appropriate time frame. And so with corals, you have to respond within 45 days, ideally, so that you can reattach the corals and you don't lose any endemic or endangered corals, and that you can do actual restoration and response immediately. And so that's why we loved parametric insurance, because the payout structure, and it's like Charlie said, it's all in the details. We structured it to pay out within 5 to 7 days so that we can really get going and respond immediately, because we have a very short time frame for coral reef restoration. And so these are the different scenarios, you know, us taking out the insurance and paying it out, a hybrid about who's doing it, or just having a third party or the government purchase the policy. And then, so our next step is to actually design the insurance policy. And so since we were taking the Mexico example and utilizing it here, we had open source data from NOAA, and we looked at the different tracks of past hurricanes so that we can prove to the insurance companies that and demonstrate that this is a need here, but also there's a fine line about reducing their risk as well as making it beneficial to us. 1 second. So we looked at in the past, I think this was from 2019 to 2021, we had 15 or 18 named hurricanes that passed through Hawaii at different frequencies. And then we've looked at like how they actually behave while they hit the Hawaiian Islands, either move around it because of our geology and our big volcanoes. And some of them have passed right through. In 2002, I think Iniki went straight up around there. Yeah. So Iniki went straight through there and hit Kauai, and many came really close. Let's see, just trying to change my slide. There we go. Oh, here, this is the slide I actually wanted. So in our guide, so this is step 3. So in our guidebook, we looked at what triggers we can actually insure. And so we have a list of insurable risks and uninsurable risks. So what can we actually insure? And so hurricanes, and the parameter would be wind speed. Yes. Other insurable risks that are really interesting are marine heat waves and cold water anomalies, actually. Stormwater runoff, which is really important here in Hawaii, and tsunamis. Other risks that aren't insurable are, you know, oil spills and boat groundings, outbreak of any diseases. And yeah, diseases are happening across the world with corals, but that is an uninsurable risk. So sorry, let's get back to purchasing the insurance. And so this is really lays out all of the steps we had to take to actually get to signing a policy. And so mostly it's, you know, I can go through this real quick. So the buyer finalizes the market deck and the term sheet with their broker. So we're the buyer, we have a broker, and we have the insurer. And so we worked with Willis Towers Watson as our broker to help us through this whole process. So, you know, we work with the broker to place the policy on the market. We received bids, negotiated the bids, and like Charlie said, everything is in the details. And so everything was like, you know, all of our lawyers are looking at this. How do we actually implement this in Hawaii and in the United States? Because we haven't done it in the United States before, only in Mexico and Belize. We selected a provider, and this actually, we received a bindable quote, and the provider issues the binder. And that's actually when like the insurer and insurance agency is on the hook. And so if a hurricane starts out in, you know, near Mexico and comes towards Hawaii, if our binder is in place, then that hurricane is covered. If our binder was not in place and it started generating and it headed towards Hawaii and we didn't have the binder, then even if it hit at a category 5, we would not have been covered. So then we drafted the policy and signed the policy. So there was many steps in between. And so going back to looking at our actual thresholds, this was the Mexico example that started off with a category 1. And these were our guiding parameters and thresholds that we were looking at. But when we worked with our broker to create a market deck and a term sheet, when we went out to market, we actually put out 3 scenarios. And so scenario 1 was just regular risk for the insurance agencies. This is what the Mexico example had. It was what the market was had. Actually, I'm going to jump to option number 3. We drastically lowered not drastically, but in the insurance agency minds, drastically lowered the threshold so that the payout was bigger. And so at a lower category, we had category hurricane, we had a bigger payout. And then option 2, we actually decreased the threshold to a tropical storm. And I do see we have a hand up, but I'm going to just have maybe 5 more slides and then we can get to questions. So then at the threshold level, it's we lowered it to 50 knots. And so this actually ensures a tropical storm, which has never been done before. And so we just threw it out in the market. We wanted to see what options and if we were even going to get any bidders. And we actually did. So the option that we received and eventually went with was for option 2. And so we broke that category 1 threshold and we're now insuring tropical storms. And so it's there are, just so that you guys can see how so this is, we have these are our polygons. And so we wanted to cover the entire state, but you have to like hone in on what your actual like center of the circle is. So we created 3 circles. So we created 3 concentric circles that overlap each other so that we could cover the entire state. And so we have 1 over Oahu, 1 over Maui County, and then 1 over Hawaii County. So all of these overlapping rings could actually cover the entire state. And then as you get closer to the middle, that's actually zone H. And then as you go farther out, it's zone A. And so if the hurricane, so our payout matrix, you can see if the hurricane comes in, hits just the outside ring, which is zone A, but it's at a category 5, so the most intense, you would go over to zone A and then go down to category 5, so you get paid out 10% of your policy. And so our policy is a $2 million policy over the term of our, over the whole entire term. So that's the maximum we can get paid out overall. And there's 3 different sites that can pay out at a maximum of $1 million each. And you can hit multiple triggers at the same, or multiple sites at the same time. So it comes through the whole Hawaiian Islands and it hits, Big Island and Maui and Oahu. It'll trigger each of those polygons or sites with a maximum of $1 million for each site and $2 million for the entire policy. And our policy, it was 15 months for $110,000. And so now to the fun part. So actually, if it pays out, what do you do? So we actually have to mobilize people and get them in place so that they can actually help us get in the water and do the repair. And so we have, different steps that we work to actually do restoration and mobilize people. And actually, like the first step actually really is to like survey what happened, what kind of damage, where it happened. If it hit on one side of the island, the currents and swells can still create damage on the opposite side. And then you have to remove all this debris. And so if you can imagine if a category 1, category 5 hurricane comes in, there's tons of things that have been washed up on the shore. And so you actually have to remove debris to stop continued damage. And then you can get in the water and actually do super cool work. So we're working on creating this protocol and response plan so that we can help to mobilize people when and if this trigger happens. I don't know what happened, but I was at the end of my slides. So let's see. Questions. I'm going to come off of video for a second.
All right. Well, thank you so much to both of you for those presentations, and we can jump into questions. We've got some great questions already. Folks, feel free to, as you think of questions, to put them in that Q&A box. So I'll jump in with the first one from Peter Williams. What are we doing to generalize or transfer this approach to forests or floodplains? That would have been a great question for Eric, but perhaps one of you can pick that up. And who pays the premiums for these types of things?
I can take what I think should happen, but I'm not directly involved in some of this, but I'd love to hear also. I think the amazing thing about what Makalea just described was it was a fantastic demonstration project that showed that this can work, and TNC's been working on a couple of these. Once you do the demonstration project, it is a matter of then how do you scale this? And then I think it is, how can you turn it into more kind of standard policies? Like as I was listening to all that, I was thinking about how much work went into designing it and building it. And some of it needs to be local, but some of it can be more standard. And over time, it evolves into a standard product and service that can be adapted more easily to other kind of nature-based assets. So that's the way I think of kind of how things go from innovative kind of demonstration to more scalable. And I think the challenge on who pays for it is making the connections between like who are the insurable stakeholders, who have a actual need for these nature-based assets to continue to be healthy. And then you can kind of, there's probably negotiation and community outreach and kind of engaging a group of stakeholders to figure out what the most equitable way to share the cost. But once you establish the economic kind of consequences of not protecting it, you can usually figure out those things. So that's my thoughts on that.
Makalea, are you working in Hawaii on any ecosystems other than coral?
So we have had tons of interest across the world. And in Hawaii, and I can talk a little bit about what Eric is working on, but in Hawaii, we are very excited on the possibility of utilizing this for cultural cultural practices. One is a fish pond. And so a fish pond is created by making a wall. And we've done this for 800 to 1,000 years. And there's many different types of fish ponds, but one that is very similar to coral reefs, we make this big wall that encompasses sort of like a in situ aquaponics. And we raise fishes in there. And so one of the triggers that I was talking about was a tsunami. And so tsunamis are very detrimental to our fish ponds. And we have a lot of interest in creating a parametric policy for fish ponds. And fish ponds act like the same as corals. Like I said, it dissipates wave action, it creates this buffer and protects our infrastructure along the coastline, but it also provides food resources for our people. So we're very excited about that.
So I know that Eric is working on some mangroves, and we've started to explore here on the East Coast salt marsh. And those are sort of somewhere in the pipeline. I'm not aware of any terrestrial work, but that doesn't mean that it's not out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've heard we're working on fisheries in California. Guam is doing an evaluation of their coral reefs. And I think, Charlie, if you wanted to say anything about other parametric policies, I heard there's like a geology one or like volcanic events, maybe. It's super exciting.
It is super exciting. There's a lot going on. I'm aware of some related to carbon credits that come from forest, and there's some parametric products around forest restoration, so that are tied into both the direct nature-based assets and also how to figure out how to do the credits that kind of emanate from them on the carbon side. So there's a lot of innovation going on, and I think every project learns from kind of what other projects do over time. Standard products fall out, and then people just get better at kind of creating the bespoke products. It's super exciting.
Cool. So I have a question here from Richard Saline. As these types of nature-based projects emerge and have begun to generate impact, how are these modeling out the monetization of risk reduction, effects for fishermen and other sectors, impacts on tourism, and the conversion to performance that encourages tax credits and incentives into a new capital stack? That's a phrase that I haven't heard before, capital stack.
That's like I think he just laid out the like next 20 years of innovation. I feel like that is where it needs to go. Like these are very kind of nascent products that will evolve into a kind of a system. And we always try to think of the total cost of risk. The total cost of risk isn't just the loss. It's the cost to administer the repairs, the restoration, but it's also the like you can optimize what you spend by investing in, hey, let's protect these things up front. Let's do things that make it less susceptible to loss. And what you want to do is create a complete understanding of all those costs, and both like how do you protect nature-based assets, how do you respond to when things go bad. So it is not just and as far as the capital stack goes, there are people who are directly interested in kind of monetizing, like, oh, if you invest in this, like the insurance industry, quite frankly, if you invest in protecting some nature-based assets, it potentially reduces flood impacts, which creates a positive revenue kind of economic stream for the industry. So there's reasons to invest in nature-based assets that provide different types of returns. So the capital stack question we run into, like, what are people, lots of people have capital, and some people are looking for profit directly on whatever they put it into. Others are looking for impact and maybe a little bit of profit. Others are looking for the public sector is looking for, like, they're going to potentially on the back end pay for the like disaster relief and other things. So figuring out who has the capital, what their motivations are, how then you can use that capital to support some of these really cool things. And the reason I kind of was really shocked about that $44 trillion, like that's half of all economic activity on the planet gets back to nature. So it gives the opportunity for people to say, like, I don't have to be just like just love nature to then put money in. There's lots of reasons, regardless of what people's motivations are, to then say we need to protect biodiversity and we need to support like behaviors and practices that and reduce the behaviors and practices that are eroding biodiversity. So creating that whole system that was kind of embedded in that question, I think it will evolve over time. And I think it is a personal goal, kind of us and Ensure, to help contribute to that happening faster. It's super exciting that question was even asked. I'm super excited.
I just wanted to add, and I'm very excited about the market possibilities and how this can actually help develop other protections. But one example that that I had heard was like, if you compare this to hurricane clips on your house. And so if you put hurricane clips on your house, you can reduce the risk and lower your insurance. And so if we could do this for coral reefs and say we're protecting coral reefs, we're going to invest in coral reef protection on the shoreline to protect our infrastructure and our property, then your insurance for your property goes down. Something like that. Like if we can really shift markets and insurance and actually shift the money to the protection of coral reefs or any ecosystem, that's my sweet spot. So very excited.
It's just a great point because once you have insurance and like all these things come together, and this is a property insurance piece, and the hurricane clips is like the absolute perfect example. What hasn't really been talked about, there's a whole nother type of insurance, which is liability insurance. And if you think about autos, like over the last 50 years, the liability around driving a vehicle created kind of incentives for them to build safer cars, get people to drive better. And we think as kind of protecting nature gets higher in the visibility, like we're really at risk, that those same kind of pressures are going to drive just all the way down to individuals and small enterprises to be more aware of nature and have more nature positive practices and value nature more directly, for just legitimate reasons, but also just for like liability reasons and things like that.
So Makalea, maybe you could pick up from that point. There's a question from Paul Papenchok. How mature is this nature insurance market and how many insurers offer these policies? Did you have a wide range of insurers you could work with as partners, or?
I think there were a wide range. I'm not sure. That was my first time going onto the market. But we had received 8 interested parties just had questions. We received 6 bids from different insurers, insurance agencies. So yeah, I think, and everybody, what our broker had said, all of these are, top providers that are very comparable, and it was mostly came down to the actual policy premium. And so I thought I was blown away that there was actually that many different insurance agencies that were ready to provide us a bid and do it at the tropical storm threshold, because that wasn't done before and that was new to the market. So I thought, I don't know, Charlie can tell me if 6 bids are good or not.
I would say it's super encouraging that there are multiple people and there is a competitive process, and the companies are starting to get deeply engaged and is equally as excited as I think we are about this. I will say it's also a tiny bit of a $1 trillion industry. And what I would say to whoever the carriers and insurance providers that might be on this call or watch this video later is this has the potential to grow to be a huge market, and those early companies that are engaging now and the ones that jump in soon are the ones that will have better products and services and be the choice of kind of organizations like the Nature Conservancy just because they do it better. It's a great business opportunity to create great products that save the planet, which is what we try to do. So it's
Well,
exciting.
that's a fantastic wrap-up statement, Charlie. Do you have any other final thoughts? Because believe it or not, we are almost out of time.
I mean, if that was a fantastic wrap-up statement, I would just say, I will leave it at that, but just say if anybody wants to reach out to me at insure.org, charlie@insure.org. We love to kind of get engaged in kind of projects, discovery, whatever, or just talk. So please reach out, and thank you to the whole team at TNC. This has been great.
Our pleasure. Thanks for joining us. Final thoughts from you, Makalea?
No, I'm finally getting up because it's actually 7 o'clock my time. So please contact me and I will be, I can better articulate what's going on in Maui. But it's been a pleasure to be here, and we're very excited about protecting coral reefs in any way we can. But also, like I said in the beginning of the presentation, it's really looking at your ecosystems and natural infrastructures holistically, and developing a lot of the I actually didn't talk about equity when we developed our policy, and how we're moving into equity as we're evaluating where we're responding. And so just making sure that you look holistically at whatever natural infrastructure you would like to ensure.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you to everyone who tuned in for your support of the Nature Conservancy. It's what makes all of our work possible. So we'll be sending everyone a follow-up email over the coming days with links to the resources we talked about today, as well as a recording of the webinar. If you're enjoying our webinars, please be sure to share them with your friends and colleagues. You can follow us on social media at conserve_MA on Facebook and Instagram to keep up with our work and get updates on upcoming virtual opportunities to connect with us. To learn more about Insure, you can visit their website at insure.org, INNSURE.org. As always, you can register for future webinars at nature.org/MA webinars. During our next webinar on May 4th, we'll be taking a visit to Western Massachusetts to explore the state's reptiles and amphibians with our land steward, Rennie Wendell. Please join us. Thank you again, and have a wonderful afternoon. Enjoy this warm weather.
Thank you all.
Aloha.